for my second act. I don't want to just go back in the business and be just another ad agency fighting for the same clients that we've been doing for years. And I wanted there to be an idea. Ageism is a big problem. And if we want to leave the agency world in a better place than we found it, we have to do something about it. And the only way that we know that we want to do something about it is to tackle the ageism issue. And the second part is to embrace the most lucrative segment of the market that there is, which is 50 plus.
Welcome to Second Act Stories, named by the Signal Awards as the most inspiring podcast of 2024. Every 2 weeks, we look at people who've made major life and career changes and are pursuing more rewarding lives in a second act. I'm your host, Andy Levine.
And I'm Scott Merritt. So, Andy, did you watch the Super Bowl?
Of course, I always watch the Super Bowl every single year.
Okay, yeah, me too. What'd you think of the commercials?
The commercials were terrible. They just really were underwhelming. I can't even recall one that sort of stuck in my mind at this point. I mean, it really was just a poor showing.
It's a far cry from what it used to be, right? It was such an event. So the interesting thing about today's interview is that it kind of ties into why Super Bowl commercials aren't that exciting anymore and not that creative anymore, because you spoke with a guy named Brent Rivard, who is a veteran in the advertising industry. Now, his second act, he's still in the advertising industry, right? But he's doing something completely different.
That's right. Brent and his two partners, who are also experienced advertising executives, all in their 50s, have started a new agency, and it's called, get this, Geezer. They are focused on serving the 50-plus demographic, speaking to older Americans about products and things they would be interested in. And they're going to be entirely staffed by individuals with 25-plus years of experience in the advertising business.
Right. And this is where the tie-in to, what happened to Super Bowl commercials kind of happens, because it has a lot to do with the experience creative that goes into it and what Brent and his team are doing now with Geezer. I just love it. So now, as somebody who, I can't believe I'm saying this, but who now fits into the demographic that they are focusing on, I actually really like the sound of it, and I can't wait to hear his story. Here's Brent Rivard's second act story.
Let's start with the early years. Where'd you grow up? Family life, that kind of thing. The early years.
I'm Canadian. I'm from a small town. Well, it's not a small town anymore. A small town outside of Toronto, just west, called Waterloo, Ontario, Canada. That's the famous place that the BlackBerry was founded. We grew up really well.
Okay.
Enjoyed growing up in a small town. I mean, it's funny. I'm in the middle of Manhattan, but if I reflect on people saying like, "Oh my God, to come back to Waterloo must be haunting," and I'm like, "Yeah, now it is," but to grow up and ride your bike away and have your mom lock you out of the house and tell you to go play for 5 hours was okay back then.
What school did you go to in Toronto, or?
I went to college in Waterloo, Conestoga College, for marketing and advertising, and then later on in life, I would have been in my mid-30s. I think I was a VP at BBDO. I went back to school to do my MBA, and I went back to Western, Richard Ivey School of Business.
Okay. Tell us about your first job in advertising.
My first job was a little place called Punch Communications in Guelph, Ontario, in between Waterloo and Toronto. I think they hired me because I drove them crazy, just calling and calling and calling, and wanted to be in this world of advertising. My wife, funny enough, was in it before I was. And I just knew that's always kind of where I wanted to be in the creative world. So I hustled and hustled and hustled and got a break. And I think I was only there for about a year and a half before I got my you call it your big break, to go to Saatchi & Saatchi and become an account executive in downtown Toronto. That was your way into the big leagues.
So you've had this long career in advertising. I think one of the most interesting parts is your work with the agency Anomaly.
Yeah.
Talk about that. You opened their Toronto office.
I got a call from a recruiter friend, Michael Gates, that had tried to place me forever. And he said, Carl Johnson would like to meet you. They're opening Anomaly in Toronto. And Anomaly at the time, and still a great agency, but at the time that was like huge news for Toronto. Like, oh my God, it's like one of the mecca agencies coming. And their first client was Budweiser in the Toronto office. And it was, you wore 20 hats, you were getting people's lunch for them and pouring coffee for guests, and then trying to run a business at the same time and then trying to grow the business. So
If you had to pick one client that you enjoyed working on the most, what would that be?
as frustrating as Anheuser-Busch, AB InBev can be, it would be AB InBev. I mean, they're an incredibly demanding client. Nothing's easy. The pressure's always on, but they're ambitious. So the reason that we're all in the creative world is to be creative, right? Even though I'm on the business side of things, I'm still, in my heart, I'm a creative person that wants to do great work, see great things happen.
So you're working in Toronto, and then you get the call. I'm going to call it the call up to New York.
Yes.
Just talk about that.
Carl Johnson, the global CEO of Anomaly, a great guy. And he called me randomly on a Saturday, and I was like, well, that's weird. I would have answered my phone anyway, but I remember looking at my wife and going, that's an odd time for a call. It was just before Christmas too. And he just explained, I've got a big challenge and a problem on my hands, and it's running the InBev businesses that we have globally. So the problem that Carl had at the time was he just didn't have somebody, I guess, that he had faith leading it. Again, a very challenging client. It requires somebody that really is being able to juggle these types of challenges. And he said, all I need you to do is move yourself to New York City, which is every Toronto ad guy's dream.
So just so our audience understands this is running for Anomaly, the global business for Budweiser, which is Anomaly's largest client or one of its largest clients?
Definitely at the time, it was the largest client. Yeah,
Okay.
by probably a pretty significant amount.
In 2020, Brent's career took a different turn. He transitioned to the client side and started working for the Internova Travel Group, one of the world's largest travel services companies. He served as their chief marketing officer. But with the COVID-19 pandemic, the company hit some very rough waters, with global travel essentially in a shutdown mode. In Brent's words, the company was simply trying to keep the lights on rather than launch a major marketing campaign. So Brent found himself without a job. Brent also realized that he missed the agency business, but the prospect of returning to the advertising world in his early 50s wasn't terribly promising. Let's switch gears to Age and talking about the advertising agency business itself. So this is a business in particular that is very focused on, I'll call it youth.
Yes.
Talk through that in terms of as someone who has been in the advertising agency business for a long time and also is hitting their 50s now.
It's obsessed with youth culture, and it always has been. And I think now we're going to see that it's going to be to potentially its detriment, because all the money is in the 50-plus-year-old cohort. I mean, that segment of the market and that demographic is owning a lot of the wealth, is responsible for probably around 30 to 40% of GDP. And here you have an ad business is still obsessed with youth. And I think creatively it was always just the misperception that if it's a Skittled ad aimed at a 14-year-old, you'll have more creative freedom than a Cadillac SUV, right? I would say that the only business more responsible for ageism is Hollywood. It's a huge multiplying problem, and it's never not been there. For those people that understand the business model of the ad business, it's just age old. It hasn't changed. It needs to change. It's going to be changing. And what's happened is that our most talented, most experienced creative people, strategy people, account people, et cetera, have been cut, and they're on the unemployment line, and they're all starting their own consultancies because the business has just cut its way to the bottom. So what's happened is the way out of the financial stress for a short-term point of view has been cut the $500,000 salaries in favor of two $100,000 salaries or three. And that's really unfortunate because it's showing in the work. I've noticed, and it's not just me there's nothing worse than sitting with my wife and I watching Super Bowl, right, for our friends, because of course we're going to be critical of every ad. But the creative product has really declined. And it's because all the best and the most talented aren't there anymore.
That's a good intro to what you've done. About a month ago, you, Karen McKinley, John Kiselhorst, I hope I'm saying that right, started a new agency called Geezer.
Yes.
I love the name. It's
Yes,
fantastic.
we do too.
Tell us about your new focus, although I think our audience can sort of guess it based upon the name.
Yeah, and that's the great part of the idea, right? For my second act, I don't want to just go back in the business and be just another ad agency fighting for the same clients that we've been doing for years. And I wanted there to be an idea. Ageism is a big problem. And if we want to leave the agency world in a better place than we found it, we have to do something about it. And the only way that we know that we want to do something about it is to tackle the ageism issue. And the second part is to embrace the most lucrative segment of the market that there is, which is 50 plus.
So your new company is going to focus on the older demographic, the
Correct.
50 plus,
Right.
but you're also going to use talent that is
Yes.
older as well. Talk about that
Yes.
side of it.
Yes. What our commitment is that your creative talent have more than 25 years of experience on the business. They know that segment of the market better than anyone because they are that segment of the market. If it's women's beauty that want to understand a 53-year-old woman, well, we're going to have a 53-year-old woman work on the business and understand what to say, what not to say, how to make them look. At Geezer Creative, you'll see some fun posts of, the short white-haired woman in the garden, but she's like 80. She's not 50. Like 50-year-old women are running marathons and are at health clubs and are starting companies. They're in their second life, for what we're talking about here. But the industry is just doing a really horrific job of marketing to these people.
Now, you've just launched this like a month ago.
Literally.
What has been the response so far to what you've put out there?
It's been pretty crazy, I'll be honest, that we knew we were striking a chord and that we would get some attention. Our website's been visited by 86 countries. We got over 6,000 LinkedIn followers inside of weeks. So we've had an outpouring, and literally me and my two partners are trying to answer every single person that reaches out and wants to talk. And we're talking to all these people, the like meccas of the industry that are reaching out and going, thank you for doing thank you for this. And I think that obviously our next stage and why we're doing this is that we become very attractive to clients that don't just want to hire another ad agency. They want to hire somebody that's specialized and that is doing some good. I mean, why not?
You're getting a lot of interest from talented people in
Yes.
the advertising industry that are over the age of 50. How about the client side? What are you seeing? I know it's very early.
Yeah,
days
it's
here.
very early, but we've had some great people reach out. We've had ex-clients reach out that are like, "Oh my God, like listen, I'm kind of resetting. Can you reach out to me in January and love what you're doing?" So it's been really promising, and we've had a couple good first meetings, right? Early days, but we'll see where we end up going.
Is it going to take a big leap for a well-known brand to hire you? And
hope not.
because someone's got to be the guinea pig, right?
Yeah. I hope not, because the idea is as simple as it is, right? You have people that are in that demographic to solve that demographic's problem. I mean, this should be more obvious than it is in reality, though. But in a business that's just been obsessed with youth, it just has been what it is. And I'm sure we're not the only ones to have done this. I mean, maybe to come up with a clever brand called Geezer, but there has to be somewhere out there other than us that's saying, hey, I stick in this lane, right? And if it's not the 50 plus lane, I know some great agencies that years ago opened focusing on the female demographic. Makes perfect sense. So I don't think it's going to take a huge leap.
You're in this very early days, but what advice would you offer to others who have been in an industry for a long time, 20, 30 years, and are now thinking of starting their own company? What advice would you tell them?
Trust your instincts.
Okay.
If you've been doing it for 30 years, then chances are you know it pretty well. And you've probably said to yourself, well, if I own this company, I might do it this way, or I might do it that way. And you might have already shopped that idea to a few people. and they've given you the nod and said, that's a great idea. You should do that, but you haven't, right? It's not easy. It's not for the faint of heart. I don't consider myself some like serial entrepreneur, right? There's a really compelling reason that I could have a paycheck right now, right? But if you're passionate about it and you give it a chance, right? Take a shot at it.
Was this a hard leap for you? I mean, to jump into this, starting completely new startup, new concept.
It's a roller coaster, and my partners and I talk about this. That I'll have a bout of anxiety about, Jesus, is this going to work? And I know we're really early days, but is this going to work or isn't this going to work? But then the next day you're on with a pitch consultant that's like, guys, you're onto something here. Like, I really like this. Like, this is going to make things easy. I just got to find you the right client. And I think that it's been an exercise. It's a humbling exercise. And I think it's something I have very little of, which is patience. I've had to learn it in a hurry. Because you don't just wave your magic wand and set up shop and the clients just flow in. It's not an, if we build it, they will come. You need to get your message out there.
Andy, what an interesting interview. I love Brent and his story, and I love that he's also so kind of fresh into his second act, which seems like something that we've been doing a little bit more of lately, is people who are really fresh on the heels of launching their second act careers. Now, while you were talking, I had a couple of questions that sort of bubbled to the surface, and I just have to know, does Geezer have any clients yet? I started an agency 3 years ago, and I know what it's like to start from scratch and go, oh my God, where am I going to get clients? But they do eventually come with the right approach. So do they have any yet?
They do not. They have been talking about starting this agency for about 6 months. They launched it in December of 2024. But at this point, while they've had some great conversations, no one has signed on the dotted line. So no clients at the moment.
Okay, well, that does bring up an interesting thought, though. So if they don't have any clients yet, it's only been a month. I mean, it's not like, oh my God, the sky is falling. But I wonder if it's really the gold mine that they think it is.
Yeah, as I've looked at this, there are a couple of things going on. First of all, Americans are living much longer than they were before. They're in better health, they are more active, and they also have a lot more wealth. Now, there are all sorts of statistics and numbers about this. Many are actually on Geezer's website. But as I sort of dug into this a bit, I'm completely convinced that, a large chunk of income and revenue is in the 50-plus market. So I think it's absolutely the right, way better to market to this group than to market to people in their early 20s.
Got it. So a question about the agency world now, or the advertising world. So we both have agency backgrounds, PR agencies, but agency backgrounds. How bad is ageism in the world of advertising?
Let me share 2 data points. The first is less than 5% of all people who work in the advertising industry are over the age of 50. So that's a very, very tiny percentage. The average age of someone working in the advertising industry, 29 years old. So the industry really focuses on hiring youth, marketing to youth, and ageism is quite strong in the advertising world.
Wow, it's shocking to hear, but not surprising, if that makes sense. Now, before we wrap this up, I do want to ask one more question. Speaking of aging and what today's 50-plus market looks like, do you have any idea how old the Golden Girls were supposed to be?
I did love that show, but I have no idea what ages they were supposed to be.
I think, aside from the mom who was supposed to be, a more elderly lady, I think that the rest of them were supposed to be in like their 40s and 50s.
Okay. Well,
that's what 40s and 50s looked like back in the 1980s. Right? That's crazy, because that's not what they look like today.
Absolutely nuts. Yep, agreed.
All right, well, I think on that note, it's probably time to put a pin in this one.
Sounds good. If you'd like to learn more about Brent Rivard and Geezer, you can visit their website at geezercreative.com. There are lots of great articles on the 50-plus market and ageism in advertising that are in their reading room.
We hope you'll keep following us on social media or find us on all our social media channels, Facebook, LinkedIn, Substack, YouTube, Instagram. We're everywhere, and you know that we have Chloe now, and she's keeping these channels just full of great content. If you like what you hear, if you like what you see, please share us with everybody and let them know we're here. That's how we grow.
We hope you'll keep listening. There are more second act stories just around the corner.